Welcome back to the Two Quarters Podcast. This is episode 4 of the podcast with Corey and Katie. I am Corey.
You sound like a little robot. I am Corey.
I think I sound perfectly reasonable.
You sound like one of those like AI projects that they do where they try and make it sound like super lifelike, but it like there's just a little like something there that you're like, this isn't a person.
I take exception to that. But anyways, welcome back to the Two Quarters Podcast, episode 4. We're going to be discussing the 4th episode, consequently, of the Rings of Power. And boy, do I have a lot of thoughts on this one. This one angered me.
It is surprising how quickly this show goes downhill. It started off like not great, and then like the next episode was also not great, and then like all of a sudden it just went so fast downhill, like incredibly. It's amazing.
Well, all my predictions that I had made, well, you know this, I didn't make them on the podcast, but all my predictions about the character of Galadriel and what would happen have so far been pretty much confirmed.
Yeah, because we've already seen this with other female characters like Rey Skywalker, She-Hulk. What kind of pisses me off a little bit is the way that they write these female characters is it seems as though writers don't know how to write a good female character. Like, they take all of the attributes from a male character and then try and shove them into a female character, but then remove all the good ones. Like, they take the stubbornness, headstrong, quick temper type of attributes, and they just leave out anything else like could be a good attribute that the man has, shoves it into this female character and makes them just inherently unlikable.
Yeah, I think I read something somewhere that was talking about like the effect that these characters have, that, and maybe not so much Rey. I mean, this show is a perfect example. Galadriel in this is a petulant child in her mannerisms and how she behaves, like the way she interacts with other characters, interacts with world powers that she's, privileged enough to have the time to be able to speak with. The way that she speaks to other people should have some consequences, but it doesn't. It makes it seem like the writers are incredibly cynical in their writing, where it's like, oh, it wouldn't matter if she was polite or whatever. They would just walk all over her. Like, I can hear it now. I can hear the voices of these people, thinking that.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of, and I had a boss who was like this, how some people would describe some women in positions of power as bitchy when they're only trying to assert themselves and, try and do what's best for, their team or their company or whatever. But then it just kind of turned into this movement of women being assertive, pushy, and stubborn for no reason. And so they were being bitchy. But then they're like, oh, well, they're just calling us bitchy because we're being assertive. And I'm like, yeah, because you are being bitchy. It's no longer you trying to do what's best for your team. So you have to assert yourself in a way that you might not be comfortable with. It's you being like, well, I need to get my way because I'm in charge here. So it has to be how I say it is.
Right. It's almost as if they believe sometimes, like, you can make yourself believe it's for a principle. But the problem with human nature in general, not just for women, but also for men, if this were the case with, almost any man who is corruptible in the same way, reverse the positions, it would be equally the same way, I think, where it's like, you just assert yourself. It might start out on principle, being like, hey, listen, historically women have been treated unfairly when chances for opportunities come up. And, I do believe that is the case, where like a society like ours may have viewed women as sort of lesser than for a long time, or not even may have, but definitely did. And then as we progress to make it more equal as far as like opportunity goes, you think you might operate on principle, where it says like, where you might say to yourself, oh, well, I'm going to break the idea. I'm going to get out of the idea that I'm just being bitchy, as you say. Instead, I'm just being assertive. It's the same thing that a male would do, but I'm viewed in a different light, which sometimes is the case. Like, it's unfair, you know what I mean? Unfair to characterize people just solely based on their gender or sex in this case. But in the same way that I think there's another stereotype where it's like males who are really short or small or tend to be viewed as weak by other men have this like complex, they call it Napoleon complex, where they have to over-assert themselves as like a compensation for that lack of size and intimidation factor, I guess. So if they get promoted to positions of power, then they feel the need to I mean, for lack of a better word, act bitchy as well. Like where they get power hungry, and it might have started out on principle where like it's like unfair necessarily to judge this person just because of the height. It's nothing they can control. They might actually be a good leader with good ideas, good decision making, good ability to lead others. But when your identity is based around something like that, something intrinsic to you that you can't change, and you are concerned that others are judging you in a certain way, even though you have no proof, or your proof might have to be twisted a little bit. You might have to make a couple leaps. That's the danger in it, is where you take that leap. Oh, yeah, this person definitely thinks lesser of me. And then after a certain point, I think it becomes spiteful rather than on principle. Like you're just behaving spitefully.
Yeah, and then at a certain point, you just become a self-fulfilling prophecy where you're like, I'm not bitchy, I'm just assertive. And then you become bitchy over time because you think that's how others see you when it's not. And then you start acting bitchy because you think other people are seeing you like that.
Yeah, I think that is the case, and I think it builds into a sort of resentment, and some part of it may be justified. The fact of the matter is, whether or not it's justified or not, it's detrimental to an individual because fundamentally the world does not actually work that way. Fundamentally, I don't think most people are so sinister in a job in a workplace that they're all literally thinking like, "Oh, that person's not qualified because she's a female." Like, there's probably a few people in that place that do think that way, but eventually, I mean, you do a good enough job. I don't care who you are. Eventually, you're going to work your way into the good graces of most of your employees or the people under you because you just do a good job. You know what I mean? And I think even the people that are like that, I think even some of them can be convinced.
I was gonna say that's how I feel sometimes when we play video games with our group because I'm the only girl there. And I feel like sometimes like if I make a mistake, like if I mess up a mechanic or if I'm not good at jumping, then other people will be like, oh, she's a girl, obviously. So it's, obviously she's gonna be bad at this. She's not gonna know the mechanics. But they all fuck up just as much as I do.
Probably
If
more.
not more, yeah. So
Yeah, probably more.
it's like every once in a while I have that thought. I'm like, oh, they hate me because I'm a girl and I'm not good at this because of that. And I'm like, no, they all mess up the same amount. It's fine. And I give them just as much flack for it as I get for it.
Yeah, I think that is the remedy to most of it is to stop looking at yourself as a perpetual victim to people and trying to read their minds. Because it might be the case that you're right. You know what I mean? You might be right. It might be the case that people are unfairly judging you and as a matter of fact they are going to treat you differently based on it. In reality, like fundamentally most people aren't doing that. And so when these writers for these shows make these characters, I think they're so cynical. And you hear it in the interviews they have where it's like, they get these statistics pumped to them all day. Like women make 70% of what men make for the same job. What else? They'll say like, you have the historic treatment of women.
It's this weird thing of, oh, well, women were treated as lesser than or weaker in the past. So now instead of us writing them as like equals with men, we have to make them bigger, better, faster, stronger. Like it can't be equality, it has to be.
Right. And I think that's where the idea of the Mary Sue comes in because then you get the wish fulfillment fantasy of inserting yourself into a situation where you say, like, I wouldn't normally be here. And I think now is the time to like really make Galadriel into something that all the men would want to be, but they're never going to accomplish. Like, that's what it feels like they're taking her character in that direction. Whereas she was a great character by herself in the books.
And even if you hadn't read the books in just the Lord of the Rings trilogy, she was such a good character there. Like she had powers that no other elves did. She was the wisest and fairest of all beings. She was able to perceive what people were thinking and get into their heads and talk to them that way.
She had the gift of foresight,
Yeah.
an unusual gift that was her own gift. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like no
Like
one else
she
really had
was
that.
yeah, she was such a cool character. Even in for like the 30 minutes maybe of screen time that we get with her in Lord of the Rings, and they have just taken that and bastardized it into this obnoxious like 16-year-old girl who realizes that she has to get a job for the first time to pay for gas for her car that her parents bought for her.
Yeah, but in that analogy, not only is she the 16-year-old girl who realizes she has to get a job, but the job she wants is out of her reach and it doesn't make sense for her to have it because she hasn't earned it.
Yeah,
But
she's
she
trying to be
deserves it.
the CEO of Apple.
Right, but she thinks she deserves it And so she's going to do whatever it takes to get there and manipulate anyone and everyone in the situation to get there. And she's actually really good at manipulating people and using guilt to get them to do things that she wants them to do. And she's really, really obnoxious and demands everything of everyone. In this little scenario, imagine if the world actually did bend to someone's will that was like that. Imagine the 16-year-old girl did get her way and eventually worked her way to the CEO of Apple with zero experience in it. But it didn't matter, right? And it's all happening in this little, like, what is it? What is he? It's a type of way of like viewing the world where you're just completely delusional. I don't remember what it's called. I'm thinking of a term, but it doesn't matter. But imagine this delusion is where it's taking place in this 16-year-old girl's mind. She's actually sitting in a corner, padded cell, drooling, thinking that this is how the world works. This is what it seems like when it comes to this like writing, where it's like you take this character that is a great character that, by the way, brought the walls of, what was it, Barad-dûr down by herself with her power. She's no slouch. She's a very powerful character.
Yeah, just because she's not like this warrior princess doesn't mean she doesn't have her own strength or her own powers to be able to do things. Like she just because she doesn't have her little dagger and her little set of armor doesn't mean that she's capable of doing.
Yeah, and just because she can't physically manhandle 3 large soldiers that are trained in war,
armor with all of their weapons.
It's just such a weird decision to make. And not only that, like, I hate to keep bringing this up, but it's an odd choice to have a actress that is so short play her, because she's, again, in the book, she's talked about as being like 6'4".
Because elves are inherently tall, and she's very tall for an elf.
Yeah, she was like
big.
Yeah. So it's an odd choice in my opinion, but putting that aside, this episode just further took her down this road of like being incredibly demanding, obnoxious, almost just evil. She's a sociopath. She doesn't care how she does it, who she hurts as she goes along the way. Her task is the only thing she cares about, and that's what she's going to do to get it. But I suppose we should get into the specifics now that we've discussed the things that make us angry about this one, and there were many.
Oh yeah, so the first opening scene for this episode is the queen lady of Numenor,
Muriel.
Whatever her name is. She's in this room with all these mothers and their babies, and she's holding the babies. I'm assuming this is supposed to be like some sort of like a blessing thing, or like a what is it when you take your baby to the church and get baptized by the Pope and they're a christening?
I thought it was just called the baptism.
Oh,
it might be,
but specifically for babies. I don't know. I'm not Catholic.
I think it's just a baptism.
Yeah, it reminds me of that, but she's just kind of holding them, and she's like, "Oh, that's a good name." Like, "Oh, what'd you name your kid?" "Oh, that's such a good name. She's gonna be a strong baby, and she's gonna be wise, and she's gonna be great." She hands it back. She picks up the next baby, and it's like, "You name this baby." And then Numenor gets flooded by the sea. Somehow it comes down over the mountains, and then she wakes up, and it was all a dream.
Well, it's supposed to be a vision, right? Mm-hmm. That's the idea, is because it is something in the books, in the Silmarillion specifically. That's the fall of Numenor. It was drowned, kind of like Atlantis, I think was the inspiration for it. And that's what I think they're hinting at with that. Although I am curious, because that is a story I'm familiar with, and they're taking many, obviously the timeline being smushed together is problematic, but they're taking it's a huge departure from that story.
Yeah, it's so hard to tell exactly what's going on in this show, strictly because I feel like the timeline, like they've taken events and people that happened thousands of years apart and have condensed it into this little like 10-year gap, and it's very confusing. It's very hard to follow anything that's going on, because you're like, wait, this isn't in this war, which doesn't happen for another like 15,000 years, so he shouldn't be here. This guy wasn't alive until, thousands of years later. He shouldn't be here either. But you still have all these characters just crammed into here doing things that don't happen for a while and taking part in events that don't happen for a while. And it's very confusing how they've done this.
Well, did we ever confirm when this is taking place? Like, did they ever put a year on it?
I'm pretty sure it's in 15 to 1700 in the second age.
Right, but
I think
that would be problematic just because the second age goes all the way to like 30 something.
Yeah.
And that's when Fall of Numenor happens, the establishment of Gondor.
Yeah, I can look it up to double check, but I'm pretty sure that's what they said.
I just don't remember if it was a graphic or something in the first episode or something that, like had the time on it, or if they never just bothered with it because they knew this would come up.
Okay, yeah, everyone's saying that it takes place from the 1500s to the 1700s, Second Age.
Okay, so Farazan shouldn't exist.
Durin probably shouldn't exist yet. At least not that one. I'm assuming he's the one that's connected with the Balrog because there were, I think, like 5 or 6 Durins.
Yeah, his dad's name is, I think, Durin as well.
Yeah, well, there was a whole line of them. I'm just not sure which one was associated with the Balrog
Yeah,
and all
I,
that.
I honestly can't remember the timeline to when they dug too far deep and stumbled upon it, but yeah, I do know it was called Durin's Bane.
I wish they would have been more specific. Oh, this is Durin the 14th Spain. No, it wasn't the 13th.
He might have been. I'm not remembering.
Yeah, I don't remember, but it's okay. And then after that scene is the scene of Farazan walking through the market with his son. And this character confuses me the most because, like Corey said last week, I believe, Farazan was the king of Numenor during the downfall. So not only should he not exist yet, he's the king. There wasn't a queen of Numenor. It was this guy. But in the show, I don't believe it's ever confirmed that he's the king of Numenor, let alone married to the queen lady. Like, he just seems like a court advisor who is like kind of important.
I don't know that Tolkien's ever specific about her not being a queen in title. Technically, I mean, she would be because she did marry
wasn't
Farazan.
the ruling figure of Numenor.
No.
She might have had the title, but she wasn't the one making all the decisions while her husband wanders around in the marketplace.
He was the story behind it. He married his first cousin, that's Muriel, and that was against their laws for obvious reasons, incest. So the people weren't very fond of him. So he was very corrupt, and he was the one who was corrupted. Ultimately, it was his time where the corruption finally came to a head with Sauron, and that caused the fall of Numenor and the punishment of Eru, where he literally drowned Numenor, right? And that's the story. And Elendil prepares his ships beforehand and is actually faithful to the Valar and to the idea that Numenor was established on, which they're kind of trying to communicate in the show. And I just don't think they're doing a very good job. It's like whoever the consultant was seems to not fundamentally understand what Tolkien was trying to communicate about the philosophy, like I talked about the philosophy behind the world, or they're so ideologically captured by something else, which is my suspicion here, that they are incapable of viewing the world that way. And so that like this like cynical attitude has come out in switching the roles, where Farazan is like this, almost like he's not even a court like aide. Like, he doesn't do anything. I don't know what he does. He stands there and announces to everyone that Muriel's about to make a big decision. But in Tolkien's works, he was this like wicked guy who took Muriel, who didn't want to be with him, I'm pretty sure, and married her against their laws. And it was a symbol of the kind of corruption, kind of like reminiscent of Israel back in the days when they would have a wicked king, and God would punish them. And in the same way, that's what happened with them, is they had to face the judgment of Eru ultimately, who is above the Valar even. But anyways, that's the initial story. Is like Farazan was a very important figure, but he wasn't like a likable figure or anything like that. He violated the laws of the Numenorians by taking his first cousin to marry, and then it was like a symbol of the fall of Numenor that was coming, that Elendil actually prepared for and managed to escape, which is a compelling story. It's a really cool idea. It's like kind of like the Noah thing, where he knew in advance and prepared his ship to leave, and eventually would found Gondor and in that kingdom. And this is the line that Aragorn would come from. But in the show, they've made it so that they reversed the role of Farazan, and it's like Muriel is in control, and they don't treat Farazan like a king. He's sort of like this like really popular figurehead who's just...
Yeah, I'm not even sure if the show has said that they're married. I think is implied maybe, but it's very hard to tell what his title and responsibilities are. He seems to be important, but not the figurehead of Numenor.
Well, my suspicion is that whenever there's a female character involved in the book at this point, they're going to become the focal point of any of the any element of the story. And I think the idea behind it is, at any chance they get, they want to parse out a certain demographic representation in the show, where like if they have the opportunity to make Muriel the queen undisputed queen who's wise and does all these good things, even though she's relatively unspoken about in the books, and she's just kind of an unfortunate victim in the fall of Numenor, which is part of the tragedy of a lot of civilizations. But now she's reading, has visions of the future, and I'm not sure what direction they're going with it. That is my initial impression with this character, is that she's just becoming the figurehead because of the necessary like quotas that you might have to meet. You know what I mean? Like where you could have a compelling female character. Actually, you do have compelling female characters. I mean, you picked one of the most compelling characters to center the show around, Galadriel, and turned her into a joke. It's just terrible at this point to watch. And now Muriel's gonna suffer the same fate, I have to imagine. Although Muriel is much less insufferable than Galadriel. And at least Muriel makes decisions that make sense from the narrative standpoint that they've written her as, even though that doesn't make much sense in the lore of Tolkien and staying faithful to the original works.
So while king slash court advisor slash court jester Farazad is walking around the market with his son, they're having some sort of conversation. I don't remember. I think it's supposed to be one of those deep ones, like why does a rock sink when a ship floats type of thing.
No, I remember exactly what it was. He was teaching his son the art of being a very ambitious politician, saying like it's the small matters that you need to understand that a ruler has to involve himself in, you know. And his son makes some comment about it, and he says, what was that about? And he's like, oh, sorry, I was just trying to be clever. He's like, clever is for
Being clever is
small-minded
for
people.
squares.
Yeah, he basically says it's for small-minded people, and he said, I'd much rather you be wise in your ambition. It's almost like I don't know what to make of him, because it's not a terrible concept. You know what I mean? I would rather you be wise, as usually most people would say that's a good way to advise your child. But then what does he consider wise is the question. I can't tell if he's a bad character, a good character, a neutral character. What is he? Because then he gives a speech to the Numenorians who are upset.
Yeah, well, that's the scene that's coming up next. Is the guild member that had his little guild button stolen by Ariel's, or not Ariel, Galadriel's friend. I don't know, thinking of the Little Mermaid because they were in the sea. Galadriel's friend, Halbrand. This guy's in the marketplace giving a speech saying like, "Oh, the elves came here. They're gonna take our jobs. They're gonna take our women. They're gonna take our money. They're gonna take our food. Are we gonna stand by and let this happen?" And it's weird because the way that Tolkien had wrote the Men of Numenor to be were these very noble, that like they almost fit like the definition of men, right? They're very noble, very strong, very proud race of man, and they're reduced to these like petty, squabbling racists, which is very odd for them to do, considering that they have a alleged Tolkien expert on the writing team who advised them. So I'm not sure what happened here. Also, and this is a very small, minor detail, Numenorians are supposed to be big. All the Numenorians in the book are described as very tall, very like broad shouldered, just big men. And all of the extras they got are either like 65-year-old men that kind of hunchback, or these like 18-year-old kids that they can't even like grow any sort of facial hair yet. They're these little tiny kids that they hired. And with $1 billion, you think you'd be able to hire a few big men, maybe.
I don't think that they were interested so much in being faithful to the idea about what Numenor is. And I don't think that, I'll be honest, I don't think the Tolkien scholar, I'm putting up my quotation marks, I don't think the Tolkien scholar understands the point of that story or the idea behind it in this like historical tale, which is like, in this world, as the Numenorians became corrupted, it's sort of this like it's the story behind Aragorn, which is men seem most corruptible of all beings on earth. Like they seem to be the ones most like Morgoth in their temperament, which always bothered the elves, which is what always led to the like disputes between those two groups, almost every single time. But men are also unique of all the beings created because they are mortal. And I think Tolkien calls it a gift. He says it's a gift that they're going to be, in the end of days, they'll receive an kind of a great opportunity. And they don't live like the elves. They're not attached to the world. In fact, that's their gift, is they have the gift of death, they are going to be parted from it, and they'll never be at ease in the world. And so I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding of what the men that are noble are. It's like a call back to the idea of that old, not even an old idea. Well, it is an old idea, but like, what is that line from Elder Scrolls that Paarthurnax says? Is it better to be born,
Oh yeah, is it better to be born good or is it better to be born evil and learn how to do good?
overcome that evil?
Overcome your evil nature and be good.
Yeah, it's a paraphrase of that line, but it's such a good line, and I think that's fundamentally the story of what nobility and honor, the nobility and honor of men is about. Is they are the most corruptible race, I think, in Tolkien's works, but they're also the race that's most capable of overcoming that and actually achieving new heights that even the elves can't, because the elves don't understand what it is to be mortal and have like a short amount of time on the earth and within Arda, and to have the temptation of that kind of power, of whether or not you actually do you even want this gift. Do you want this gift the same way that, I don't know, the other beings would they appreciate this gift the same way, or are you going to go down the road of Melkor with your pride that you've been given this extra gift, like Melkor Morgoth? He was given these extra gifts. He was giving sort of like a part in all the other Ainor's abilities, and he squandered it in like hatred and contempt for them, and he wanted to rule over everything. And I think that's really the question of men: is are they going to squander the gift that Eru's given them, or are they going to live up to that higher standard? And so the Numenorians are like the height of men. This is the most honorable society that ever was. And to be brought low is a symbol of how corrupt and great the evil threat is. And this is what Sauron represents. When I watch it, this showrunner just fundamentally, in my opinion, misunderstands the point of the fall of Numenor. And now, which we'll discuss later, it seems to become something else.
Yeah, so then Farazan goes on to give this speech to the upset guild people about how by his calloused hands he swears that he's not going to let the elves, come in, take our jobs, our money, our food, our women, and all that. And I don't know, I understand what they're doing with this scene. They're trying to make him likable to the people. This is him, dealing with the small matters, like he was saying to his son, and you're making a difference, in a positive way. But it feels like an odd scene to have in a show like this where you already have like so many storylines going on that you could devote your time to, and they chose like a 2 to 3 minute long scene with this guy and then Isildur's sister just standing in the background staring at him, like the camera cuts to her every once in a while. It just felt kind of odd, like the time could be better spent with maybe one of the main characters and what they're doing or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any problem with character development. You know what I mean? Like
Well,
seeing,
me neither, but they should be developing the main characters and like the kind of side ones like Halbrand and the little hobbit girl, not some like random
I
court
mean,
person.
ordinarily he'd be very important
And
as a
he's
character.
supposed to be
Ordinarily,
important, but he's not really in the show, so
I
I don't.
I think they're trying to establish a situation in which he becomes important. So like he's going to be an important figure in all of this, but he's going to be an important figure in a different way. And what my prediction is he's going to be the ultimate downfall, not Muriel, which he was in the book. It wasn't Muriel's fault. Because he was the king. He had responsibility for listening to Sauron, but who he didn't know it was Sauron. But I think he's going to be the downfall, and they're starting to establish that. I think is his son, as far as I'm aware, that he was talking to. And we've said it several times, but I didn't hear them like explicitly say that. It seems like that is the case. It's implied heavily, but did they ever
that
say it
it's his son.
specifically? Yeah, did they ever
Yeah,
specifically say they
yeah.
did?
He calls him his dad at one
Okay,
point when
all
he's
right.
talking to
Yeah,
Isildur's sister.
I don't remember that at all. His son's an interesting character because he's an actual character. Like
Yeah,
he,
his son's cool. He's got that Luke Skywalker 70s haircut, but aside from that, he's pretty cool.
yeah. Well, he's an interesting character because he has something. He has some vested interest in Elendil's daughter,
Yeah.
and he's
And
not totally on
he's
board.
funny.
Yeah,
He's shown things that he dislikes, things he likes.
yeah. You kind of understand him as a character. You
Mhm.
relate to him a little bit. Whereas I mean, Elendil's daughter. Do we understand her? What is she like? She likes drawing.
Well, you don't know that she likes that. That just could be her profession.
Well, she clearly does. But like that's the implicate like they're very heavily implying that it's her passion. But she's being like it's like a Cinderella story. She's made to scrub things like in this
Mm-hmm.
very next scene that he talks with her. She's sort of like under the thumb of this headmaster of this guild and it's not everything she thought it would be. You know what I mean? But do you feel like she's capable of being portrayed as doing anything wrong?
The Isildur's sister?
Yeah. Has
No.
she
I
has
mean,
she
eh,
yet?
she does. There's been no development for her. All we know about her is that she wanted to get into the guild and she didn't, so she had to reapply. Then she got in, and then she went on a date with the prince of Numenor, I suppose. And that's it. That's all. Like, she's just a very bland character.
The only conflict is that other characters don't appreciate her enough for what she is. You know what I mean? Like it feels like Elendil, his lesson that he's going to learn is he's got to appreciate his children more.
Yeah.
His very sensitive son, Isildur, which is an interesting direction to take him.
Yeah, I don't know why they chose to make Isildur like a sensitive sort of like, oh, I didn't want to be a soldier. I wanted to be, something else. When that wasn't how he was portrayed at all. He was a very honorable man, very talented warrior.
Very ambitious,
Yeah,
which
very
is his
ambitious.
eventual downfall. But
But he wasn't this like soft spoken, like I don't want to say cowardly. That's not the right word, but timid almost. I think is how I would describe him. I'm not sure. He's for only having 10 hours to do a show. They sure are showing a lot of characters and a lot of events into this 10 hours.
yeah, I'm thinking, I'm trying to think through each character that I know at this point, what like really well. Starting with Galadriel. Galadriel at this point, like we've discussed, is a petulant child in her demeanor and she's a sociopath. She would 100% sacrifice everyone around her to accomplish her goal. So she's fueled by vengeance and
Also,
rage.
in this episode, her driving force, her motivation flip flops. Like for the past couple of episodes, it's been I'm hunting Sauron to avenge my brother. It's all about vengeance. I'm gonna kill him. Blah blah blah. And now all of a sudden it's oh well I have to help my friend because he's the king of the Southlands and we have to help him get his land back. Like where did that come from?
Well, I saw somebody who made a video about that and was like, they were talking. This is where I get the sociopath idea because it hasn't. Her intentions haven't flip flopped. They appear to have flip flopped each different scene that she's in, but that is actually a sign that she's just an expert manipulator. She'll say whatever it takes. What she's convinced this guy he's the king. What proof, right? She just says he's the king and he's the king because she needs him to be the king, right? Because that gives her leverage and says he's of noble blood. Now we can go and get to the Southlands, which is her ultimate goal because she wants to kill and hunt down Sauron. So what does she do? She goes and acts like a petulant child in front of everyone, constantly, just saying what she wants, right? That's what flip flops is her demeanor. Like when she's with Halbrand, I mean, don't get me wrong, she's still a petulant child, but she's less of a petulant child. She acts less like she listens to him a little more, which is very unusual because she doesn't listen to anyone clearly. You know what I mean? She still has that arrogance about her whenever she talks to him, but he's much more likable because he's not arrogant. He's just whatever. I'm going with the flow. He's a much more likable character, right? He could be more manipulative if he wanted to, but he just tells her straight up, like, "Hey, you don't think maybe yelling? Remember when all that happens in the episode? He's
Yeah.
like, you don't think yelling
Well,
and all that stuff,
that's the scene that comes up next. She is granted an audience with the queen,
which is a privilege,
which is a privilege, and
which she probably shouldn't have anyways because she's not liked there.
Yeah, she's essentially a
And she's
prisoner.
insulted them.
Yeah, she's essentially a prisoner on this island. So she has an audience with the queen, and for some reason in her mind, she thinks it's a good idea to ask the queen for like an alliance with her specifically. She hasn't, brought any of her fellow elves into this. It's with her specifically, and she wants the queen to send over her soldiers and her ships to help retake the Southlands for this guy that started a brawl in the tavern because he tried to steal and is now in jail. And we have to help him take back his homeland. And I think it's supposed to be like, oh, if you were, noble and honorable, this is what you would do. And the queen is just basically like, what? Why did you come in here demanding this of us? And she says no, which is the reasonable thing to do because why would the Numenorians care about people in Middle Earth, especially some displaced, like, ragtag group of men in the Southlands. And then this makes Galadriel very upset, and she starts insulting the queen. And she says, like, well, take me to your father, the man that's locked in the tower, the only person that can make real decisions around here. And then, of course, that makes the queen angry, and she throws Galadriel in jail,
Oh,
as she
hold on.
should
We
have.
we cannot skip the line. So, what is it the queen says to prompt this line? So Galadriel's standing up there having her little temper tantrum because someone told her no yet again, and she's not getting her way. So what does Galadriel say? It's like the queen says there's a tempest over the horizon as like a metaphor, you know? And immediately Galadriel yells, "There's a tempest in me." That is the equivalent of a medieval emo line right there.
Yeah, that was so painful to sit through.
That was cringy, and it was incredibly obnoxious and very disrespectful of the position she was in. This is what bothers me. Galadriel in the books was described as like one of the wisest elves who's able to see further than anyone else. She held her tongue when she needed to, and she knew how to be diplomatic. She was very old at this point, also older than everyone else in this scene. She would not behave like a petulant child. She might have had like you could have written the character where she was insulted because she knew how wise and old she was, you know, compared to these people. But oftentimes when people like that insult somebody wise and old, they don't necessarily react like children. They'll find a way to reroute the situation or be more diplomatic or do something else. Maybe you could even say get angry and figure out a way to outsmart this person, but not this screaming, yelling act. This is so stupid and childish. And I feel like it's portrayed as being like this really brave thing to do. And it's just so out of place. And in my opinion, it should be out of character. It's an insult to that character.
And then the scene after this is we cut to Isildur in his boat training, and he messes up something on purpose to try and get himself kicked out of his sea training. And the headmaster or whatever gets mad at him and kicks him and all of his friends out, right? So he's kind of ruined all of his friends' lives. And then it's revealed in a later scene that he could have just resigned if he wanted to. Like, he didn't have to mess up. He could have just said, "Hey, I'm done,"
Well,
and
I
left.
think the implication is that he didn't want to do that because Elendil told him not to, and he would have heard about it if he had resigned. So instead, his plan was to get kicked out of it because then he couldn't say that he resigned and rather he didn't pass the test kind of thing. But this captain or whatever his position was tells him, "Oh, I've seen you do that a million times just fine. It's not possible for you to make a mistake." That was clearly deliberate, even though he wasn't looking. It was very unusual. It was lazy, in my opinion, lazy writing. They could have like spent a second to show the captain observing him, like his unusual behavior or something, and saying like, "I've been watching you, and I saw that. That was deliberate." And it seems to me that you put everyone's lives in danger, you know, or you made a dumb decision, or you could have spun it any number of ways. The writing could have been very simple. You could have shown it, not told it. Just have him angry and reveal that he was kicked off later. But the question is, why does he then kick off his friends? What did he know that they were like that close of friends? Like, was it just like everybody knew, like, oh, you guys are all tight, and because of your actions, now I'm kicking these two off as well. They didn't do anything. Like, if anything, if they were willing to like just completely ignore Isildur and be like, hey, listen, that's your call, man. I want to. This is what I want to do. They would have been great candidates. They didn't do anything wrong. And why were they associated with him in that sense? Like that didn't make sense to me. Why he kicked all three of them out, other than for their plot to go move on.
Yeah, we gotta get their story moving somehow. We can't do that naturally. It was very weird. And then next is that scene in the orc pit or wherever. They're digging these tunnels, and Erendir tried to escape, and then they killed all of the people that were trying to escape except for him. And they were like, "Oh no, you're special. We're gonna take you to see whatever they're calling the overlord down there, Adar." Yeah. So they're in this pit, and it's all these orcs standing around, and there's one orc lying like kind of like sick or like injured on the floor. And this, I'm assuming it's supposed to be an elf. I don't think it's Sauron. I think it's supposed to be an elf. He's got the pointy ears, and that's about it, and long hair, I guess. But elves don't have that anymore, apparently. he comes over and he's like, comforting the orc. He's like, "Oh, poor thing," and then he just stabs it and kills it. And then that's kind of it.
They act in this one scene. They did a good job of like showing, not telling, that he cares about the orcs deeply.
Hmm.
Like each and every one of them, like he treats them like ordinary people. He's in tears as he's getting ready to kill this one that he's like comforting as he gets ready to put him out of his misery, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So they do portray it like it's a good job of communicating without actually telling us that he cares. We learn a lot about that character right then and there.
Yeah, he seems cool. I'm wondering if it's because, how orcs were elves that were, tortured and mutilated. I'm wondering if this is an elf that wasn't quite completely turned into an orc. Like he kind of just willfully was like, yeah, all right, I'll join, whatever. Because when he's talking to Aaron Deer, he's like, did you grow up in this
So he's
place?
speaking to him
In Quenya, right?
Elvish.
That's how you
Yeah, it's an
pronounce it.
Elvish.
Yeah. He's like, did you grow up here? And he's like, yeah. He's like, by the mouth of the river. And then Aaron Deer's like, who are you?
Well, he's not here. He's talking about Region, which is where most of the story takes place out over in that direction. This is the Southlands, and he's asking him in Elvish if he did.
Yeah,
which is like, which is like, well, you said here. I thought you were saying like in the Southlands.
No, did you grow up by the mouth of the river?
Yeah, he asks him all that, but it's just a bait and switch to me. This character is a complete. Even though they've developed him with some good.
Yeah, he's gonna be
no.
nothing.
He's gonna be pretty irrelevant, I'm guessing, and he's a bait and switch for like everyone to think that this is Sauron. It would make the most sense because he seems to have all the signs that this is Sauron, but I think it's a bait and switch. That's all. But he does seem interesting at first, though, because they're putting a lot of effort to make him seem interesting so that everyone will think that.
Yeah, and then this not Sauron guy just lets Aaron Deer go. He's like, oh, go to the men that have, fled their villages and have taken up refuge in the watchtower. And like me personally, if I had slaves working under me and they were digging a tunnel for me, and then one of them starts an uprising and I kill all of his buddies and left the leader alive, I don't know. I'd maybe not want to let him go free because he seems like he's fairly capable. And I don't know, I might want to have him around, maybe try and turn him to the dark side.
I mean, yeah, he seems to have no shortage down there of people that are digging. I would just send one of the weaker, more cowardly people. Go up there, nail this to their door, and come back. And if you don't come back, we're going to find you and kill you. This is an elven soldier. You wouldn't just release him.
Or just send one of your orcs. If it's nighttime, just have them go out and, nail their little note to the door and leave. If you already know they're there, why not just send one of your millions of disposable orcs?
Well, clearly he doesn't want to because he cares about them deeply. So you could say like maybe he doesn't want to send them out to a danger, but he has plenty of other individuals he could send over there. A pointless, one of these other human beings who's not really as capable as Aaron Deer. Yeah, you have him. Keep him there. You know what I mean? Like, but the writers just didn't have a way to get him out of the situation. So I think this was the best way. They could have written something else. Nope, they chose not to. But they did reveal that big scar on that elf's face, Adar's face. Looks like a burn mark.
That was pretty neato. Did it look inconsistent in some scenes to you? Like they didn't maybe fully apply all of the makeup for it?
It looked odd. It did look odd, but...
Like maybe it was just the lighting and the angles, but it did look like in a few of the scenes they might have not completely applied all of the makeup to where it needed to be.
Yeah, I do recall thinking at one point that when it was first revealed, in fact, that I thought it looked like it was
very prominent.
It looked like it was peeling. Like you could peel it right off.
Yeah, in the first shot it looked like very prominent and you're like, that's like the first thing you see. You're like, oh shit, look at his face. But then as the scenes go on, it's like a little bit less noticeable, and it could just be lighting and angles, but it does kind of look like they just kind of half put it on. Like, oh, we only have 20 minutes to shoot this, just slap this on your face and get out there, it'll be fine.
Yeah, not to say anything, like I don't want to be one of those people who's like criticizing something I don't understand. Like I've never applied Hollywood level makeup or things like that, so I'm not gonna dog on this too hard. Like it might be really difficult to make that convincing, but I know it's possible. And as a viewer,
they have $1 billion. They can make a scar look convincing.
Yeah, as a viewer, it did seem a little underwhelming, but I don't know. Maybe there were troubles that day in filming that I don't know about, but they probably should have taken the time to make it a little bit better. Any other problems I had with that scene? Oh, you have him grabbing the knife, grabbing that little
his shiv.
Yeah, that little like piece of metal that he found on the ground. They made it like really tense situation. I like the the tenseness of the situation though, because it made that character seem more interesting. That he was for one speaking Elvish and describing like he seemed almost like off in his own world kind of thing when he's describing it, like talking about the plants that were growing in the river as he sailed. He says he sailed down it once, which makes you wonder who he is even more. But I'm sure it'll be a big nothing burger. Hope not, but I have that feeling.
This whole show is just kind of a big nothing burger. Like it's not that interesting, really. It I said this before. I'm only watching it at this point, mostly for the podcast, but also because when you drive past a car wreck like on your way home, and you're like, you kind of have to slow down to kind of look at it because you're curious to see what's going on. And the bigger the car wreck, the longer people will take to slow down and look at it. This is like a 20 car pileup blocking off
Well,
95.
that's why this is worse than a nothing burger to me because it's a car wreck that has people that I care about in it. So when I'm like looking, I'm like concerned because I'm like, I care about them. Don't do that. That's Galadriel. What are you doing?
Put her down.
Why is she in a stretcher? Why is she in an iron lung? What have you done? Who caused this? That's how I feel when I watch it now at this point because I do care about these characters. I care about the world building. I care about the narrative as much as people might, make fun of that. I don't care. I don't care that they think it's stupid. I genuinely enjoy that narrative. It's like it's such a beautiful story and I love, reading Tolkien's writings and I love going over that story and understanding the philosophy behind it and all that stuff. So that seeing them do this to the show, specifically to these characters, is disheartening.
And there's a comment left on our first episode. They said what I was thinking about, but didn't have the words to articulate. Is it seems like the people that make these, specifically this show, but you could say this about like any of the Marvel shows, the Star Wars shows, these things are supposed to be nerdy. You're supposed to get very involved with it, almost like you could be there. Kind of like a D&D thing where you're like role playing and you can see yourself in these worlds because they're so involved and everyone's so committed to keeping the original story and to making sure that the lore is consistent and that the characters are written well and they're relatable and all of these different elements. But it's like these show writers, they're like, ooh, that's kind of nerdy. We got to make it cool and we have to make it mainstream and appealing. But that's not the target audience of any of these things. Is you're appealing to the nerds, to the people who want to get deeply involved in these sorts of things, not,
Casual viewers.
the people, not the casual viewers. And they've taken something that's supposed to be for their target audience and they've like shifted it and contorted it into this thing for a completely different audience. And the new audience doesn't care about the original product, and the audience that actually appreciates Lord of the Rings and Star Wars and Marvel is like, no, what have you done to this? It's like they're trying to make everything like cool and badass, and that's just not how you do fantasy.
Well, it's worse than that. It's even worse than just that. Like there are elements of that where they're like, yeah, we need to change this aspect because it's not cool enough, and it doesn't matter. It makes everything worse. These are non-characters. It's a non-starter for any written work. Male, female, orc, elf, human, whatever. Any character that behaves like Galadriel will be universally disliked. I'm sorry. The only people who like this character are people who think they are this character, who are delusional. And even they, I guarantee you, hate this character because they probably hate themselves. This is a deep truth that people aren't willing to accept, is that this bitter ideology that guides the writing of a lot of these new movies and stuff like that make these characters who are so one-dimensional and fantasy fulfillments, they're gonna go down in history as so bad and so terrible and a detriment to art itself. It's just awful. They're no longer like characters we can relate to. They're just wish fulfillment, and it's so disappointing. It ruins the concept and the medium of the original author's intent, which is heartbreaking.
We cut to the watchtower where all the men of the Southlands have kind of flocked to, and they have an issue. Is like they didn't bring any food with them, or they have too many people and didn't bring food or whatever.
Which is odd because they have a wagon that can carry enough food apparently to offer provisions and cellars filled with food.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You would think, if you had to flee your house and you didn't know when you would be coming back, like maybe I should, bring everything, not everything that I can carry, but any food I can carry and maybe any like medicine or extra clothes would be something that you might want to bring. But thinking is hard when you're not thinking.
Well, they need this woman leader to think for them.
Yeah. Which I don't know. I'm fine with her being in charge, whatever. I don't care. But she makes such poor decisions. You would think at some point people would have been like, okay, maybe we need someone else to kind of be in charge here because they're out of food. And her son says, hey, I can run back to our town and I can go into, I can go grab whatever's left over there and bring it back. And she's like, no, 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 we're not going to do that. We're going to go forage for it. And he said, but that's only going to last us a day. And then she says, well, then we'll be grateful that we lived another day. Like, that's such poor planning. And that's so,
She's treating it like a mother would who's irrationally afraid of her child being killed or taken or something, which I'm fine with, but that doesn't mesh with good leader.
yeah. And that's the thing. If she's so worried about this being so dangerous, and don't let your kid go, you go, or send, I don't know, some men to go
That
do
would
it. Like,
make the
you
most
don't,
sense.
yeah. But instead, she's just like, oh, we're just going to forage and whatever we find is the food we're going to have. After they've already established that the animals in this land are dying and crops are dying. So I don't know what she thinks that they're going to
Well, it's
find.
proven that she's wrong then, right? Because remember after they were like, oh yeah, that kid was right. Later on, when he does come back, it was like, we only got a few, I think, pheasants or something. And I was like, this isn't going to feed
Yeah, I
everyone.
think they brought back like 2 ducks or whatever. Yeah. And so the kid and his friend end up going to the town and surprise, surprise, they get attacked. Who knew?
And they get attacked on the kid choosing to go into one more place. They actually would have gotten away scot free with pretty decent amount of supplies and could have gone back later.
Yeah, they have a whole wagon full of food, and the kid's got like 3 bags slung over his shoulders of food. And he's like, oh, I'm just going to check this one last place. And the other guy's like, why? We have enough. Like, they could have just gone back with that. And then if they needed more, come back because, there's going to be some more back here. But instead, he's just like, no, I'm just going to check this one last house. And, it's just like a little bag of like oats or corn or something. It's just like this little teeny bag, but that's all he wanted. And surprise, he got attacked. And I'm not sure what one lone orc was just kind of doing there, just hiding around. And I think it's the inn that they go into or
It's
the
the tavern.
bar or whatever, the tavern. Yeah. He's just chilling in there by himself, just hanging
Well, they
out.
replayed the scene where the initial scene of like revealing that it was an orc that was in the one house, you remember? Under the floorboards kind of thing.
Yeah, in the
They
kid's
replayed
house.
this scene over again as if we hadn't already seen this and as if we already don't know what it is that's over there. Like, we know it's an orc. Why are you doing this again? I don't understand.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to make it scary, but they weren't sure what to do, so they were like, "Oh, well, it was scary the first time we did it. Surely the second time we do it, and it's gonna be equally as scary." They get in this fight, and this kid pulls out this little the sword handle
hilt.
thing, the hilt. Yeah, to me is the only interesting part in this show. That I just want to see what happens with the hilt. And he like stabbed. He's holding it out and he like stabs the back end into his arm to break the skin and draw blood, and that makes the blade like ignite, appear, be reforged, some sort of thing. And then he manages to fight off the orc with that, and then he goes and hides in a well, which is like the shittiest hiding place you could ever pick because you only have one way out, and anyone looking in your direction is going to watch. He's going to be able to see you climb out of a fucking well. Like, at least pick something with 2 exits.
Well, I'm fine in the situation he was in. I mean, to be fair, he was in an emergency situation. He only had a few seconds to decide, and I can understand picking a bad spot in a moment where you're panicking, especially when you haven't been trained to do anything. Also, where is he going to go that has 2 exits? Where would you have gone in that situation? Remember, because he was like outside.
I don't, you could go into another. Well, the thing is is it supposed to be sunny outside, or was there a scene with? I think there was a scene actually with the clouds like covering up the sun. But there are so many buildings like around that you could hide in and just wait for them to come in through the front door, or then you go out the back door, or maybe it's a house that they've already searched or whatever.
Yeah, but they're going to scour the building, and you don't know that they're not watching all the entrances. I would say that I disagree with you here. I think the well is actually not a bad place for him to hide because he can hide under
I'm
the
just
water.
saying for him to get out of though, there's no way. I mean, he did get out without being spotted, but due to contrivance.
Well, I mean, the whole thing has to be at that point, right? Because you're in a
Yeah.
situation that the writers wrote where it's like these orcs, not only do they now know that you're here, but they know that you have a very valuable artifact that they want.
Which is it? I wonder if it's the thing that they've been searching for, or if this is something else entirely. Because you remember a few episodes ago, the orcs were like, "Oh, we haven't found it yet, but it's around here
I think
somewhere."
it's this. I think this is what they're referring to.
I'm very curious. But I don't think there was any. Was there anything in the Silmarillion about a really cool bad guy sword?
No, no, there was nothing that I recall, anyways, about one that would form with blood. I think this is made up entirely because the Southlands, the people of Southlands, and all that stuff is made up as well. Yeah, I don't think there's anything. I think it's just part of the. I think it's a what is it, MacGuffin,
Yeah.
that they're chasing after, just a object. So until it's revealed whatever the importance of this thing is, which it obviously it's magical, but it's just one sword. So maybe it's like a key to something.
Maybe if you hold it up to the horizon of some, like, I don't know, wreckage, maybe it'll show you exactly where the thing is that you need. And then this little thing will flip out of the bottom of it and it'll point to the exact location in the wreckage that you need to go
Oh, don't
to.
bring that abomination back up. I don't even want to talk about it.
And then another thing that was just confusing with this is like, with this next scene coming up is like what exactly the time frame is between episodes, because it cuts to the shot. You remember it's these like towers under construction, and that's the tower that Celebrimbor is crafting, and it's already got like a couple stories on it. Like it's like half done, and so I'm like, are the dwarves just like, are they like ants? Like they just work so fast and so furious that they are able to get these projects done really quickly? Or are there like weeks and months between these episodes? Because it doesn't seem like it. They seem to be happening back to back.
Well, the elves and the dwarves were known for their ability to craft things very well and very quickly. I mean, they learned from Aule himself, especially the Noldor, who that's the group of elves we're kind of following at this point. So I don't think it's unreasonable to portray it as happening very quickly. But yeah, I don't think it's I don't think the time frames are all exactly aligned yet, or they don't have to be if they don't want them to be. Like these things could be happening in sequence, or they could be happening like
I think they are happening like together, right? Because they all saw Mr. Meteor Man fall from the sky at the same time, right? I don't know if we've moved on like months
what we
since
could
then.
have is what I'm saying. Like at this point, because that's the only thing that's tied them all together that we know all that happened at the same time. It could be. I don't know. I'd have to. We'd have to see where it goes. If it is happening that quickly, maybe it's a little unreasonable. But that's the part. That's one of the parts that I could probably just let it go. Like it's like, yeah, maybe they just have the ability to build really quickly.
It's like watching a time lapse of a building, but like in real life, like there is no,
It's not
not sped up
yeah,
or
they're just
anything.
super fast. Dwarves are natural sprinters.
Dangerous over short
Yeah, there
distances.
you go.
And then the next little like sequence of events and scenes that happen were the most annoying to me in this. Elrond goes to visit Durin's home because he can't find him. And so he goes to talk to his wife and he's like, "Hey, do you know where your husband is?" And she said, "Oh, he's down in like the quartz crystal room or something like that." And he said, "Well, then why didn't he take his quartz axe with him? And it takes days to get down there. Why are you making his favorite dinner for tonight?" And she said, "Oh, well, this type of crystal isn't mined with an axe. It's
Pride.
picked or pried or something." Yeah. And this is his favorite meal, but I'm going to let it sit for a few days because it needs time to set or whatever. And then they ended on this kind of like awkward, like, "Oh, okay, well, that makes sense. I'll see you later then." Then it obviously cuts to her talking to Durin on outside in plain view of everyone.
Well, I don't
And
think that
she's
happened directly after.
let me see.
Well, I'm
He
saying
did.
like I don't think timeline wise they were trying to communicate this. Like Elrond had been gone for a little while. I think like it was the idea they
Well,
thought.
I'm saying it's the next. It's
Oh,
the
yeah,
next
yeah.
scene. That's what I meant. Yeah. So the next scene is them walking in a very public place, and she's not very quietly saying, "I told him where you were," and he's like, "Oh, that's such a good lie. You're such a good wife. We'll probably have sex
I'm
later."
glad you're a really good liar. I'm glad I married you, a great liar, rather than that other chick.
Yeah. Yeah. Is very weird. I think it was supposed to be like funny or cute or whatever, but it was a little bit weird. And then cuts to Elrond just, sitting up kind of like Batman style up on some other platform far away, just
Reading their
watching,
lips or something.
listening. Well, elves have very good ears, so he could probably have heard
I know,
them.
but weren't they implying that he was reading their lips because he's like mouthing the words as he's doing it? Maybe it's just a weird tick he has. I don't know. But let's not skip the fact that before that scene, before all of this happened, the reason Elrond is here is because Celebrimbor is suspicious.
Yeah, the thing that I don't know if it's supposed to be like it's making Elrond look like a really bad person and like really manipulative and like a politician almost, because Celebrimbor sent him to say, hey, we need help to build the towers. That's why they initially went there. We need help to build this. But then every time Elrond talks to Durin, it's not like, oh, we need help for this. It's, oh, well, 20 years is too long to not see my friend.
But that's not,
And
that's not the reason he's there.
yeah, that's not the reason that Celebrimbor sent him there. But then he keeps coming back afterwards because he wants to be with his friend. And then he's curious about what his friend's hiding. But every time he talks to Durin, he's like, 20 years is too long to not see my friend. And he keeps saying that. And it just makes Elrond look like a sleazebag. Like he's just using his relationship with Durin to leverage and like to get to know their secrets and find out what's going on with the dwarves.
Yeah, it's making the most noble elves in the stories that Tolkien told, like Elrond and Galadriel. Now they're just manipulative sociopaths who will literally do and say whatever and convince you that they mean it. Where Elrond's he's a little smarter about it and more diplomatic, but Galadriel's,
Because he's a
yeah, but
politician.
Galadriel's just more like in your face, like, I'm going to take it from you. I want this. Give it to me now. Thanks for giving it to me, but screw you too. That's what it's starting to feel like. It's I talked about it before, but portraying Elrond in this way is so stupid.
Yeah, it was a really odd choice to go with. But so after Elrond either reads their lips or hears what they're saying, he goes down because he knows where this cave is apparently. And this whole thing is built on, oh, they stumbled across Mithril in this cavern, and it's a very dangerous operation. It's very difficult. We have to keep it secret and keep it safe, and it's more valuable than gold, and we're gonna be rich and prosperous. The reason these dwarves went into this mountain at all to dig is for Mithril. They knew it was there. That's why they went there to dig. It wasn't something that they stumbled across while they were digging for quartz or whatever else. They knew it was there, and that's how they made their wealth. And they would gift it to their friends and their allies, like they gave Bilbo the shirt. It wasn't this
Well, the elves
secret,
did.
covert thing that they had to keep hidden
Yeah,
from everyone.
the elves made the Mithril armors.
I thought it was the dwarves that did.
No, the dwarves and the elves knew about the Mithril in Khazad-dûm, and when they were friends, Celebrimbor specifically, he made that door, the door for Durin. They were very good friends.
The secret door from the Fellowship.
I don't know if it's the same one or if that one was just a different one. I can't remember. In any case, he did make a major, like a main doorway to get into Khazad-dûm. And when they were mining Mithril, I'm pretty sure that like they had it. They were like working together the whole time. Like as far as I remember. I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe the dwarves did just discover it and they were hiding it. But as far as I knew, I'm pretty sure that I'm gonna have to look into it later. But I'm pretty sure that Celebrimbor was the reason that the elves were involved in that. It wasn't Elrond, and Celebrimbor was the one who was friends with the dwarves rather than Elrond. And there was obviously eventually a falling out with the dwarves, and I think that was something different. But yeah, the elves knew about Mithril, and they were given it, and they crafted things, as far as I know. And that's where the Mithril shirt comes from that Frodo wears.
Yeah, I think I might be wrong about this, but I think after the Battle of Pelennor Fields and after the ring was destroyed and all of that in Lord of the Rings, I think the dwarves, Gimli specifically, gifted Gondor a Mithril like front gate door type thing because theirs had been broken down during the siege. I'm pretty sure I remember reading that in one of the appendices. Like they just gave him a whole door of Mithril.
That part I don't remember as much.
Yeah. So another scene with Elrond and Durin, and they're standing in there, and Elrond's like, I don't care what's in this cave. All I care about is your friendship. And then Durin makes Elrond put his hand on the mountain and swear on the mountain that nobody can know what's in here. And they pull it out, and it's Mithril. Surprise, surprise. And then there's this kind of like, awkward scene, I guess, where he like opens a little box. Oh, wait, no. The shaft collapses.
No,
Wait,
the box.
no, the box scene comes
the box
first.
is open first, and he literally swears on his. He makes him swear.
Yeah, they got to put their hands on the mountain and
He
swear
swears
on
an oath
the rock.
that he's never going to speak of it to anyone, and it's a very important secret. Then he gives him it.
Yeah, and so Durin opens little box, and there's like a little, I don't know, thumb-sized piece of Mithril there in its ore form, I'm guessing. And Elrond's like, oh, can I hold it? And then there's kind of this like weird like close-ups of Elrond, and then there's close-ups of the Mithril in his hand, and then there's close-ups of Elrond's hand, and then there's close-ups of Elrond's face again, and it looks kind of like this weird like oh, he might steal it, or like, oh, this might be something bad, and it's a very weird vibe. But then he gives it back. He tries to give it back to Duran, and he's like, I don't want this. All I care about is our friendship. And then Duran is like, no, you keep it. I care about our friendship too. This is for
Like
you.
they're one-upping each other with their friendship claims.
Yeah, like, no, I love you more. And then a mining tunnel next to them collapses, and there's dwarven miners stuck inside. And they've another problem with this is they've said that mithril mining is very dangerous, very risky thing to do. My knowledge, obviously, I've never mined mithril before, but it was no dangerous than mining like gold or quartz or whatever else they were after. It was the Balrog and other unnamed things that lived in the depths of these mountains, like far below ground where no one had like dug to before. That was the dangerous part. Like, you don't want to dig too deep because there's some nasty old stuff down
Well, they
there
didn't.
that you don't want
Well,
to
they
mess
didn't know
with.
about
But
it.
they didn't. Yeah, they didn't know about it. But I think that's what the show is trying to say. Like, oh, it's very dangerous because you never know what might happen. But in universe, the dwarves would have no reason to believe that if they dug, really deep down, they're going to find some sort of terrible thing. Mithril isn't inherently dangerous to mine in and of itself. I think they're going to bring a Balrog into this. I'm hoping they don't. I think that's kind of where they might be going by making mithril dangerous to mine, is they're going to awaken some evil spirit or some old nasty thing that's been living in the earth for who knows how long.
Well, I think what they're gonna end up doing is they're going to it'll be like a end credit scene where they're digging and then you just see like a light of flame and like popping up or something,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, "What is that?" And then it cuts away. Like I have a feeling that might be what they do, but they could just go balls to the wall and be like, "Ah, here he is, Balrog. You remember this guy?
You like
Durin's
him,
Bane
right?
is here, and look, he's gonna Bane Durin." But it's
Yeah.
yeah.
And then the next little bit of events that happen here are so fucking bizarre. So these dwarves get trapped in this cave because their tunnel collapsed or whatever. When they should know, as dwarves, when you're mining, you dig two tunnels in case one collapses. You have another one to go out of. You don't dig just one. Dig some sort of air shaft that you can exit out of if your tunnel collapses. But whatever. So they get stuck in here. And then it cuts to this scene of Durin's wife singing. And initially we thought it was like a funeral scene, like, oh, the dwarves died. Like, that's actually kind of sad, And they have this scene where she's singing and everyone's, wearing black and they've got their hoods up and they've got their little candles or whatever. And Elrond's just, kind of standing in the background watching. And then he goes up to talk to Durin's wife and he's like, what was that song? And she was like, oh, I'm singing to the mountain to let the dwarves come out. Excuse me? So instead of diverting all of your resources and assets to helping get your friends and family members out of this tunnel or this cave that they're collapsed in, you're just gonna sing to the mountain and have all these people hold candles like it's some sort of like candlelight vigil or whatever. They could have had this scene, they could have had Elrond helping Durin uncover these dwarves and save their lives, and it could have been a really good bonding moment for this relationship that he supposedly cares about because 20 years is too long to go without seeing his friend. But instead of doing that, he just attends a church service for the mountain.
Here's where I'll say I don't necessarily have a problem with the whole like them speaking to the mountain, because in Tolkien's world, the physical world is sort of it was crafted by the Valar, and the dwarves are very closely tied with Aule, who is of the earth, and he dwells there just like almost sort of like their god of the sea kind of thing. If that's the idea that they're trying to communicate, where it's like, oh, we're speaking to the mountain, which is us inadvertently saying, like, kind of praying to Aule, please help them if you can hear us, kind of thing. But it doesn't seem like what they're doing. It's odd, and it seems like the person. I mean, unless I'm mistaken, that's not the way Tolkien's world works. Like, you don't pray to the actual mountain, but I'm willing to give them the benefit of a doubt and say that maybe that's just what they're calling it when they're actually. It's like a form of like a
If
ceremonial form of asking Aule for help or something like that.
if that is what they're doing, I think they should be more explicit about it. Like, hey, we're not praying to the rocks. We're praying to this god that we believe in and we follow, not.
Well, that's where it gets complicated because they're not gods to them, really. They're created beings too. They're just
Okay, well, you know what I mean. They're
right. But I want to make sure that we don't. What I'm thinking of is the people that will critique this that are very well read in this stuff. And I want them to understand that we're not trying to say that we think that these are like the equivalent of the Greek gods to them. That's not the case. In fact, Tolkien explicitly states that they're not like their masters or anything like that. Rather, they're the betters of this existing world who can see further beyond and can do greater things. They're clothed in greater power, but they're not gods to them. There's only one God in this universe. So for those that are would critique it that way, I do want to make that clear. But we are saying is like they do treat them though as like protectors and people that can intervene in these situations. So in this case, it would be Aule. But if they're praying to the mountain, that's a weird direction. That's all we're saying.
Then we cut to the next scene, which is back to Galadriel and her friend in prison. He's kind of lecturing her. He's like, "Oh, why did you end up here?" And she's like, "Oh, I made the queen mad for some reason. I couldn't tell you why." And he's just like, "Oh, well, the queen's court really isn't your typical battlefield, is it?" Which it's supposed to be. She's supposed to be a leader. She's supposed to be diplomatic. She's supposed to be really good with people. She's not a warrior princess. That's not her role. Then the king slash court advisor, court jester man comes down with his 3 guards. He's like, "Hey, you got what you wanted. We're giving you a ship back to Middle Earth. You're boarding tomorrow or today, whenever," which was all she wanted from the beginning. And then she decides, "No, actually, I don't want that anymore." And then somehow overpowers 3 armed men that are like a foot taller than her, shoves them into her cell, locks them up, and then the king court jester man just lets her walk away. Like he has the sword out and everything, and the friend in prison, Halbrand, he's like, "Oh, I don't think you want to do that." And so he just resheathes his sword and is like, "Okie dokie, sounds good to me," and just lets her walk away to go wherever she wants.
Yeah, and she's constantly rewarded with selfish decision making that regards no one. Like you're right. When she first came there, she just wanted to be let out. You know what I mean? To be taken back over there so she could continue her hunt. She has no plan, by the way. None whatsoever. She's just flying by the seat of her pants at this point, which she's lucky that they're protected by the plot armor that she's surrounded in. And by plot armor, I don't mean like she's protected physically, although she is. We know she can't die. But she's literally protected from being forced to deal with consequences of her poor decision making, or at least for any amount of significant time. She's put in jail for what? All of 10 minutes, seemingly. She gets lectured to sarcastically by Halbrand, who then gives her a compliment while he's doing it. Like, it's not your usual battlefield. You're usually really good warrior. And then she gets to show how good of a warrior she is. She could single-handedly, while unarmed, overpowers 3 Numenorian warrior men who are renowned for their ability to fight and renowned for their gallantry as knights. Nah, she overpowers them, puts them in the cell that she was in, while, by the way, they are fully armored and have weaponry, just to show you how powerful, how much of a girl boss she is. The king is a coward who puts away, he sheathes his sword at Halbrand's, advices, which is so stupid. It's just a dumb scene, because say what you will about Farazone, he was corrupt, but he was no coward. He was just really arrogant and couldn't see clearly the future. But it didn't mean he was a coward or weak by any means. But yet again, we're going to have to neuter all these other characters to make Galadriel seem better, even though every decision she's made has been poor, and every decision she's made seems schizophrenic. But if you, I watched this video, and this guy made this point about it, where it was like everything she does, if you look at it as a sociopath who doesn't care about anyone or anything but herself, who can become a chameleon in a way and make it, she just makes decisions based on whatever is most convenient for her. She'll take a whole army of men if she can manipulate it out of somebody. She doesn't care about them. Not one bit does she care about their society or anything like that. She's manipulating the queen so that she can just get her army. She's manipulating Halbrand so she can get a guy who can lead the people in that land so she can get more of an army. So she can go after Sauron and kill him for revenge. She doesn't care how many people die. She doesn't care if that entire society of men in the Southlands is dead after this is all done. If she gets Sauron, she wins. If you look at it that way, all of her decisions up to this point suddenly make sense. She's a sociopath and she's a horrible character. She makes bad decisions, but she's always rewarded for them. This is just bad writing and a bad character.
I don't believe that people who genuinely do like this show, I don't believe that they like it for her. There's
I bet you there's
no
a
way.
contingent who see themselves as, what is the word? It's like the people who are always going on and on about like representation in art and stuff like that, but who don't want to make art with representation by themselves. You know what I mean? Like they don't want to introduce new characters or new art. They want to take what has been done and just swap races or genders or whatever of beloved characters from old things and change them. I think those people like the idea of the bastardization of something rather than the character itself. Like they don't like Galadriel. They like what Galadriel's doing to make Tolkien fans who are loyal to the original works. They like what's happening with that. They like seeing what they would call incels without any proof, by the way. They like seeing what it's doing to that group. Like they like seeing what nerds are having to deal with now because the nerds are so misogynistic and terrible. Oh, you don't like Galadriel when she's acting like this? Oh, you're a misogynist. Oh, you're a sexist or you're this or that. I think there's that contingent that loves this. It's just like they love the destruction of a beloved IP.
And then so after she escapes from prison, she goes to visit the old king that's been locked up in his tower for being friendly to the elves. Guess who's waiting there for her is the queen, because she's been notified that the elf escaped, and she's like, oh, I know where she's going. And then it's another like very tonally awkward scene where they're like, she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know that the king was, in poor health or was dying or aging or whatever. And the queen is like, oh, it's okay. I just don't want anybody to know. So please don't tell anyone. Like, oh, okay, I won't. Then after that, they go upstairs to a room where they have a palantir, which wasn't created
As
yet.
far as I know.
And then,
I don't want to quote
yeah,
that because I'm pretty sure the Palantirs were created by Elendil and that group when they left Numenor. But I could be wrong. They could have been made before. The timeline's all messed up anyways.
the timeline in the show
I
is
don't
weird.
understand what timeline we're in, and I could be wrong about it. This is the part that I don't remember. But as far as I recall, I thought the Palantiri were made by Elendil and his. I thought the Palantiri were made by Elendil and his followers after they left Numenor. I could be wrong. It's hard to remember.
Yeah. So these seeing stones are supposed to be like for like communications, like FaceTiming, right? When they came over from Numenor, they settled Gondor, but then there was also a kingdom up north that they had as well, like where the Rangers now live, like kind of where the Rangers were established in the Fellowship is remnants of a northern kingdom that they had, right?
They had it's the remnants of the original cities they developed while Numenor was still around because they had actually started to settle cities. Like they didn't just stay on their island.
Colonizers.
Yeah.
So they had these northern and southern kingdoms, the southern one being Gondor, and they had these stones for talking to each other. So you didn't have to take a year by horse to, get your message across to your kingdoms. So they developed these stones and they created them. In this show, they're used as like seeing into the future.
This one in particular,
like
she says it's unique.
Yeah. There's one stone is very special and you can see into the future, but that's not their purpose. It's for FaceTiming, not for knowing events. That is a power Galadriel already had. She has the gift of foresight. She shouldn't need to touch the stone to look into it.
It's unclear though that she understands that gift fully because by the time we see that gift manifest, it's in the Lord of the Rings. Like it's in the story in Lothlorien when she has the fountain or the mirror or whatever. But she says it's her own magic. So that's what reveals that it is her gift and rather not something that everyone has the ability to, see. So it is unusual. It is an unusual choice for that, but it's something that I think it was a choice narratively so that it's not that I think I'm almost 100% positive. It's so that Muriel can be this uneasy leader who has to make a decision, and this is going to dictate how, even though Galadriel's acted like a petulant child and insulted everyone, and seemingly would be the thing that results in the drowning of Numenor, because she's the first sign of the fall, even though this is nothing close to what the point of that story was with Tolkien. But putting that aside, she's interpreting it as, oh well, now we have to make a decision, and you got to get out. Like, sorry, I'm not giving you my army. And Galadriel's playing it off like sociopathically,
Like,
like,
yeah, she's like, "Oh, well, don't you see? We're the same. I understand what it's like to be the one that nobody believes and nobody
but
listens
knows
to.
everything.
I, yeah, I understand to, know that I'm right in my heart, but everyone around me tells me that I'm crazy." And she's trying to be like, give me your army. Give it. I deserve it. Give it to
Yeah,
me.
see, I'm right again. You don't want to be one of those people who's wrong, huh? Yeah, you have an army that's rather easily dispatched by me, but army nonetheless. Those are bodies. Let's throw them at the problem. You know, like as if the Numenorians don't have their own worries and concerns, and she's completely unfeeling, uncaring. She's literally willing to do whatever it takes to get her way, which she's demonstrated is her superpower at this point. That's her only magical power she has in the show. That the world literally will bend to her will, no matter how irreverently or irresponsibly she acts. It's amazing, honestly, to see. Yeah, it's crazy. At this point, if they revealed that she was Sauron, I wouldn't be surprised. I've been like, that actually makes sense. This show's turned good.
This wasn't Galadriel. The real one was being locked up in a basement
You know what?
somewhere.
That might save it. That might actually
Might
save
make
it.
it good.
It'd be like, oh well, now we know. You
Yeah.
got the Numenorians to follow him. That would actually make sense. It would actually be a little closer to the. It'd actually be a little closer to the book.
That scene kind of ends with her being like, you want to do the right thing. Just give me your army. Give it. Then it kind of ends there.
Well, she
and then
says
we
no.
cut to.
Remember, Muriel.
She says no a couple of
She
times.
says no this specific time, and then Galadriel leaves, and then you have that scene comes next.
Yeah, the kid who's still stuck in the well and then decides to wait for night to escape because that's when you deal with orcs at nighttime. It's a very poorly shot scene. This kid trying to escape. They could have done it in a number of ways to make it look good, but it shows all these orcs and establishes where they are around the village that they're in. And then it has the kid escaping. And almost every single time he runs from like one point of cover to another point of cover, orcs would be able to see him. He's not very well hidden. He seems to almost purposely go to places where the orcs are, like to introduce drama, like extra drama into this, because you have the orc, like that one orc, like sniffing, like he's gonna, like he smells something and he's gonna find it. But the kid doesn't get discovered until he tries to leave. And when he tries to leave, he just is standing around this corner and he's waiting. And he sees that none of the orcs can see him. And so he still just stands there and then he smiles. And then he starts to run. And then, oh, surprise, an orc comes from around the corner and tackles him.
I called him young blood earlier, remember?
Oh, yeah, they keep calling him young blood.
He tasted his blood and knew it was young. That's young blood right there. That's kind.
Yeah, I don't know why he keeps calling him young blood. That seems like a very, like, modern term.
Well, I think he literally means you have young blood. I don't think he's calling him like a nickname.
I know. I'm just saying, it just sounds like a rapper, like some SoundCloud rapper. So the orc goes to stab him. And oh, surprise, the orc gets stabbed before the kid does. And
well, he's going to cut his arm off, and it makes you think that they actually cut his arm off because it looks like he swung through. Yeah. But it's Arendir who was let go.
Yeah, he finally came back over here. It took him that long. Oh, yeah, because he had to stop to pick up his gear that he left at the tunnel, so he probably had to backtrack and look for stuff.
Do you think that Adar told all the orcs, like, hey, let him go up to the tower, don't touch him?
I don't know, because he would have had to been like, hey, this guy's delivering a message. Like, pretend to kill him, but don't, like, actually shoot him. Just shoot around him. That would make more sense of the scene, too. Yeah, because it's just it was such an awkward chase/fight scene. Because you have this kid who can't run because he's got a cut on his leg. And so he's just kind of limping along, and Arendir's running at like a snail's pace. He's just kind of skipping alongside this kid and kind of firing arrows back when he can. And then his mother finds them somehow, and she comes out with her little scythe. And so instead of taking the kid and trying to run back to the watchtower while Arendir can fend them off, they all just kind of stand out in an open field, like just waiting.
After an extremely long slow motion run, by the way.
Oh, yeah. I don't understand what it is with these stupid slow-mo shots that we have to have in episodes where it's very oddly timed and very poorly paced.
Well, it makes sense in certain situations, like when there's a dramatic moment, like a character is about to die, you know what I mean? Like in Fellowship, when Boromir is getting hit, it slows time down to make you see the drama of the situation. He keeps getting hit by arrow after arrow after arrow, and he's still fighting. Like he's still going, and it's doing it in slow motion because the moment's it's a big moment. It's the moment where Boromir dies. It's fitting. It's shot well. It's appropriate. This felt so strange. Like they're running from all these orcs in the forest and they're already moving slowly because the kid's injured, but it's like it made it seem like something was bad was about to happen. That would have made more sense for it. Like if the kid gets shot and dies, or if the mother gets shot and it's like, oh crap, what's gonna happen? And you leave it on a cliffhanger or something. No, nothing happens. They get away because of the sunlight when they get out of the trees. But then those orcs were in sunlight before. Why don't they just wear their stupid hoods?
Yeah, why don't they just bring their little scarves out with them to wear, and then boom, they're invincible.
That's what I mean, because they were like, was it the cloud cover that was saving them? Was that their argument in the other one? But they were
Yeah.
like walking out, even in what was, I mean, I guess it wasn't direct
Yeah,
sunlight, but
because they had their scarves on.
didn't they would just wrap themselves in like big shrouds and just run at?
Yeah, just put on like a big puffer coat and you're good.
Yeah. Well, there's like, I just feel like there are ways around it now that they've established this.
Yeah, they're very flip floppy on when orcs can and cannot. Like when the sunlight only appears to injure the orc or to harm them in some way when it's convenient for the storyline. But if it's inconvenient for the storyline, then they can go out in the sun whenever they want, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's a very convenient for the writing team, I imagine. But yeah, they stop and then they. What happens after that? Do they run away finally?
The scene just kind of ends with them just staring at each other and the orcs not willing to
Or they
move.
start shooting
But
arrows?
oh yeah, they start shooting arrows again, and then that's when the mom is like, "Oh shit, I should maybe pick up my kid and take him back. It might not be safe for us to just stand out here in the middle of an open field." But previous to that, they'd stopped firing arrows, but then they started again when the whole dramatic sequence was over.
Yeah, it wasn't over. It was like
And
this weird moment where it was like the crescendo of the slow mo, and it was like, oh look, the sunlight stopped them, and you thought maybe this moment might be representative of something. Like we might find like a moment to like reflect on what's happening in the story that makes this dramatic crescendos, important. Nope, just the sunlight blocking the orcs, and they start firing arrows right away, and it's like, oh, the moment's over. What did we learn? Nothing. What is going on? What is this
yeah,
pacing? What is this decision making?
it's very, very bizarre. It's an interesting watch. After that is when they're back at the watchtower and Arendir delivers his message only to the mom lady, not to
Well,
everyone.
she's
As
because
this
she's the clear,
might
undisputed
be
leader.
like a group decision that they have to make. He says that spooky elf man said that they either swear fealty to him or, he's gonna take over their lands or they can't live here anymore or whatever. And I think the obvious solution is you're already running away from your home and you weren't intending to go back anytime soon because you didn't know when this was going to be over. Why not just keep trudging along? Go north or west or northwest even. I don't know, just keep moving. Or if you don't want to leave, then, go swear fealty to him, but you got to know what you're getting into. If you want to live in your house, this is what you're going to have to do now. But he only tells the mom lady. He doesn't tell everyone there. It's not like an announcement. It's like, hey, you speak for all the villagers here, don't you?
Well, that's what I mean. Like it's an unusual. Like they have to have some reason to justify why she's the de facto leader now. They didn't like her
Yeah,
prior.
nobody likes her and she doesn't make good decisions. So I don't know why they're just
Yeah,
letting her
it
be
would
in
be one thing if
charge.
she was like shown to be like actually like a good leader who has in the past proven herself to where like all these men and children and people could be entrusted to her care for her to make all the decisions, or maybe make like by a committee all the town leaders. Maybe you could convince me that maybe she was one of the people that was like like talked her way into it. Like, listen, I was right about this. Time to listen to me. Okay, fine, you can join the little town council we're going to have to make decisions. That's how they parse it out. But no, she's the sole leader and no one's going to say anything. What is happening? That's what's so confusing to me. Why does she just get to say whatever is going on? What experience, by the way, does she have leading? Clearly, she's not had any.
I thought she was just like the healer lady.
That's what I'm
That was
saying.
her
Like,
job.
she just has one specific job like most other people, but I don't know. It's an unusual choice. I don't know why anyone would think she was qualified for that job based on what she's done. She hasn't proven herself, and she's not particularly liked. That's the other thing. She's not particularly charismatic. There's nothing about her that is like to me says she's capable of leadership. Surely there's somebody else that is more capable that people care about more or trust more in the
Her
situation.
son, I think her son would almost be a better leader because he had the idea to go back and get
Well,
food for
right, he's
everyone
willing
while
to
her,
risk his own life to help everyone. Like you're right. Like her son is willing to actually risk his life, unlike her.
yeah, is an odd choice to be. Probably because she was the only person that they had where they were like, oh, well, we might as well make her the leader here. And then the camera like pans down from them having their conversation to her kid. And he decides now is a good time sitting, kind of very much in the open. Like he's off to the side, but he's still very much in the open. And if anyone were up on like the ramparts above, just look down and see him. But he pulls the little hilt out of his pocket or his bag or whatever and is looking at it. And someone's coming, so he's got to put it away. And it's the old creepy innkeeper, surprise. And he's like, or not the innkeeper, the tavern guy, the
Was
I
that
don't
who it
know,
was?
tavern man.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so he's like, oh, I know you found that sword hilt in my under my floorboards. What have you been doing with it? Like this isn't maybe something he should have addressed once he found it missing. But so then he pulls up his sleeve and he's like, it's a thing of power. And he's got the same scars that the kid has on his arm from when you push the handle back down into your arm to draw blood to like kind of forge the blade. Which the more I think about it, what an odd weapon choice. Like you have a sword, but only if you can put your blood into it. But what happens if you can't draw your blood fast enough? Then you're kind of fucked. You don't have a blade, just swinging a sword hilt around, hoping that.
Well, that's what I'm wondering if it's like a key because if you're in that situation, because even when the kid was in the situation when he pulled the hilt out, the only reason he didn't die was because the orc stopped swinging when he saw it,
Yeah, he was like, "Oh shit, you got the
which would have made more
sword."
sense if you just swung him and like, oh, he had the sword. Like there was no reason
No,
for
that's
him to
pretty
stop.
neato.
But when he
Yeah,
saw the magic happening, he's like, okay, maybe I'll give you that. He was like in a little bit of shock, like, oh my gosh, that's the thing we're looking for.
yeah, like it might work for him, but imagine you're just getting attacked by some rando who wants your food because he has no more food. You got to be like, "Hold on, wait, don't attack me just yet. I got to." Okay, all right,
Well, that's
go.
what I mean. Like if you're in a situation where you really need it, if it just keeps dropping back down, you're like, this process. It's like a super slow lightsaber, but you also have to draw
It's
blood.
like, hold
Which,
on,
by
this
the
doesn't
way, could you
normally
imagine though
happen.
if you're one of those people who has that what do they call it, hemophobia? Like you fear of blood, the sight of
Yeah,
blood. You're like, just really unfortunate that you got it, and you're
like
like, you just pass out every time you try to use it.
yeah, or like how much blood does it need? Like, what if you're only able to like prick like a drop from your fingers? Like, just like a little blade comes out. Is it like a little dagger then? Or like if you stabbed it into like the body of someone who was like freshly dead and they had like a lot of blood, could you have like a broadsword? Like how
Yeah,
does
there are a ton of questions for
this?
this, the magic of this thing, and like what are its limits? What are its powers? What is involved? That's why I think it's a key though, because it's so inconvenient as a weapon.
I think it might be a weapon just because it's inconvenient, and they're like, oh look,
Look
magic.
how cool this is.
Ooh,
Yeah, it's not the practicality of it. It's just like, ooh, this is pretty cool.
like oh you like this, right?
Consumer, look at this. Doesn't that make sense?
You're gonna buy it for Christmas for your
Mm-hmm,
kids,
mm-hmm.
right? Please tell me you will.
Straight from Amazon Prime.
But yeah, then the innkeeper is just like, oh, it's a great sword with a lot of power, but don't pull it out yet. Just wait.
Yeah, time coming. Have you heard of
Uh,
Sauron? Which, by the way,
yeah, which is that like a common
it's
name?
not. It's a name that people did know, but not people like that would have. I imagine would have known him because he used different names and disguises all the time. Like he was known by many different names. Like Anatar was the one he deceived the elves with. I can't remember the other name. Then he had a name that he deceived men with of Numenor, but that's how he would do it. He would just disguise himself as these other kind of beings and then trick people into doing things that they didn't actually want to do, and he would corrupt them, and that's what he was good at. I don't know that people would have known about him, but I guess the Southlands people are just completely made up, so maybe let's just go in with it. They're just like, oh, you remember the days when Sauron was in charge over here? Which is unusual. Maybe that's what they're getting at though with the split between the elves, and they were like, remember what they did, the men. So maybe the men were like swore allegiance to Sauron back in the day or something. I guess that's where they're going with it. And the tavern guy he's one of the ones who remembers.
I guess I don't know. He just says, "Oh, Sauron's coming back. You
Oh,
better
and he
be
mentions
ready."
the Starfall.
Yeah, he mentions Mr. Tumnus, Meteor Man.
Or why you keep saying Mr. Tumnus?
Do you have a
I
better
don't
name for
understand
him?
though. What does that have to do with Mr. Tumnus?
Kind of looked like him when he first fell initially. And what was at the end of the first episode that he fell? Yeah.
How did he look like him? Isn't Mr. Tumnus like a half?
From the waist up
Oh,
and the ears
just a
down.
shirtless man is what you're talking about.
I see a shirtless man and I'm like, oh,
That's
Mr.
Mr.
Tumnus.
Tumnus. Every time I'm at home and I take off my shirt, you're like, "Is that Mr. Tumnus over
Oh shit,
there?"
he is real. Yeah, but then and then we cut back to Numenor and it's a very sad day. Galadriel's getting on the ship and going home like she wanted to this whole time, but we're all very upset and sad and
Because she didn't
boo-hoo.
get what she wanted, and we're supposed
Yeah,
to
and
feel
then
bad about it.
as soon as she gets on not like the little like rowboat that takes her to the big ship. As soon as she gets on the big ship, like the tree just starts shedding all of its leaves and or its flower petals or whatever it is. It just starts all the things start coming down and then the queen's just like, "Uh-oh, I've made a mistake. This is going to lead to the fall of Numenor cuz the tree said so. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do everything Galadriel wants because that's what's best for our kingdom. And I have decreed it so." And then Galadriel steps out from behind the chair or behind like the throne, and she's like, "Haha, it's me,
Doesn't it
Galadriel."
seem that like the villain reveal who's like finally got their way? It's like you're under my control now. I saw it. What if like there's like an end credit scene where it shows her the night before dropping a vial of poison onto the tree?
She has some roundup. She's
And
like,
she
"Psst,
has
psst,
to
psst,
activate
psst,
it. She
psst."
presses a button as she's going onto the ship, and it starts the leaves shedding. It's like it's just a thing shaking the tree. Or she's got Halbrand up there like shaking it, and like that's the money she paid him. It's like he's like shaking it really hard. It's like the leaves are dropping, or he's just pulling them off each individually. And it's such a dumb scene.
Yeah, and then the queen is like, "And I will personally be escorting her back." Why?
Well, because they're gonna fight in the battle, and Muriel's very clearly a warrior.
Well, the thing is like if she's gonna be a leader during these times when the kings and the men in charge would be on the front lines of war, good, put her out there. That's what she should do if she's going to assume this position. But I don't know, wouldn't you want Elendil maybe doing that? Like someone who's proven themselves to be a gifted warrior, very good at sailing.
Well,
Maybe you'd
well,
want I don't know.
presumably he's gonna be one of the people leading at least like a company into a battle. What I don't understand is that Farazone and Muriel, not Muriel specifically, but Farazone, was corrupted by Sauron, and his decision making led to the downfall of Numenor. Him listening to Sauron and believing that he was in control of the situation led to all of this. The punishment, the lesson learned from it is that don't be. It leads all the way down to Aragorn. Like there are consequences to the actions that Numenor took here. Aragorn is the redemption arc of this people. Farazone was the last evil king that really made a mistake, right? Elendil is his line is like the resolution of that arc. By doing this, by making Muriel the central figure, unless they're going to have a major change to this narrative, you're kind of messing up that arc that's overall. And I know most people won't care about it.
Maybe they have to send her away so that Farazan can be the acting ruler. And then while she's gone, they'll have the downfall of Numenor because then he'll be the king.
But and Muriel won't be
charge.
able to be blamed because she's very
Yeah,
noble and
she's
always right.
Yeah.
And other people are always wrong and they never know. And I'm seeing a pattern here. Are there any male leaders anymore other than Gilgalad, who's just an evil politician? Are there any good male leaders who are actually like leaders of any of the groups we've seen?
good ones. No.
Because I'm thinking the woman at the village.
Elendil is the only like decent male character in this whole thing, but even he had that one scene where he's like yelling at his kids at dinner for no discernible reason. He's just angry.
Yeah, but he's not actually like, I'm talking like a leader, like the head of a society or something. Like, because now at this point we've got the stories, right? We've separated the Southlands
Yeah.
people and they're being led by the village healer woman who they all hated initially, but because she was in love with an elf and they didn't like the elves and they hated her, but now they're listening to every order she makes. She's always right, even when she's wrong. You know, the great characteristics of good character writing. Then we have Galadriel, who's kind of in charge of this little group, this little band of people that she's got. Halbrand or whoever follows her, she's just always going to be in charge. That's a given. Then we have the Harfoots, which now we have Nori, who's quickly demonstrating that she's...
I'm so glad this episode wasn't about the Harfoots at all. Like there was not a single Harfoot in this episode. I'm so happy about it. I hate them.
Yeah, but we have anyways, we have Nori, who's clearly always right as well. She's just the world needs to get on the same page as her. I guess the leader of the Harfas is that one guy with the book in a way, but he's a terrible leader. He's awful.
He's batshit insane.
Well,
It's fucking
he's less
crazy.
crazy than the rest of them, but that doesn't make them good. They're like an evil society of people. Like they're the one of the worst societies ever. And then there's are there any other groups? There's the Numenorians
dwarves.
who have Queen Muriel, the Wise. Yeah, the dwarves who have Durin. I guess they have their male leadership, but he's suspicious.
He's painted to be like not necessarily bad, but just not like a good person. Kind of like how Elrond is painted to be. Like he's supposed to be good, but he does a few shady things here and
They
there.
all do. Celebrimbor is that way. He's very political. He's like suspicious of everybody. There's not really much honorable to him. Like he uses everybody to get what he wants. He wants his tower. Get the dwarves involved. Oh, the dwarves are kind of ignoring me right now, even though they're actually doing the work. I don't know what is involved with him. What does he need from Durin at this point? They're already working on the tower, right? What was he upset about that they're ignoring him further?
Yeah, and then you have that scene where the two Dorans are talking to each other, and he's like, "Oh, Elrond invited me back to his place to see Celebrimbor and the project that's going on." And his dad is like, "Oh, well, do you think it's a good idea?" And he was like, "I don't know. I think they're up to something." And he's like, "Yeah, I think so too. This is why you should go." And has it been demonstrated at this point that that the dwarves think that the elves are up to something, or has it just been like they're just inherently distrustful?
Well, they've ever since we've met them, they've been distrustful. But I thought the reason was because that they established was that Elrond hadn't been by to see Durin, the younger one. But the older one is suspicious because what they established is that they found Mithril and they want to keep it a secret. And they think the elves found out about it and now they're going to try to take it from them. And they're treating it as like kind of like from The Hobbit when the Arkenstone corrupted.
That was so fucking stupid, by
What?
the way. That whole arc with Thorin when the Arkenstone corrupted him.
Oh,
It was so bad.
well, did Tolkien write that in The Hobbit?
To my
I thought
knowledge,
there was
no.
an element of it where he was like, he paid the price for his greed, which is why he died.
I think it was more of like a general like dwarven thing, like, oh, this is all my gold and it's mine and no one else's. Not this particular stone is making me crazy.
I don't remember. It's been a long time since I read that. But, anyways, yeah, they established that that's what they were upset about. But then his father was suspicious, which made it seem like Durin wasn't actually just mad about the friendship. Like he was also really suspicious and he knew about the Mithril. But then it seemed like they made it seem like initially his father was the one who was most interested in Mithril and keeping it a secret. But now they're like, oh, his father wants to shut everything down. This whole arc on that side of things has been so confusing. I don't understand anyone's motivations. I don't understand who these characters actually are because they're all over the place. One minute Elrond's like, oh, I just did this because you're my best friend. But then we see his actions. It seems like that's not what he's actually interested in. Durin's like, oh, I only care about friendship. And you think that's all he cares about. But then he's like, but he seems suspicious. They literally have this like, this is a bond of our friendship. It's like they keep having these things where they have these moments where it's like, oh, finally they resolved this issue. And then it's like the issue comes back like 10 minutes later. It's so strange. And I don't understand their motivations. I don't understand the character directions that they're going in. And I'm so confused on that story arc. I don't know who they are. Is Celebrimbor evil secretly? Is he going to do something evil? Is he the reason the dwarves have some downfall later on the way? Or is it the dwarves' fault? Or is it everyone's fault? Are they all just really bad people? I'm just really confused.
Yeah, it's very hard to tell what's going on. Like everyone's motivations, particularly in the dwarf elf story arc, is weird, but all of them are just kind of weird and everyone's all over the place with what they want and what they like and what they need, and it nothing really makes sense. The people are whoever they need to be for the scene that they're in. And then when the next scene happens, the characters or whoever they need to be for that scene, they're not consistent across scenes. It's, oh, well, I need you to avenge your brother, or this character needs to be avenging her brother in this scene. Oh, but now she has a friend and now she wants to help reinstate him as king. That's her motivation now. Forget the brother. That's fine.
You know, if you read this, though, from that perspective of they're all just sociopaths doing whatever they need to get whatever they want done,
Yeah,
it
everything
all
makes
makes
so
more
much sense.
And if you replace Galadriel with Sauron, it makes more sense. Like, he's disguised himself as Galadriel. All of a sudden, the show is top notch.
Yeah, and then the show ends with Elendil out in the town square saying, "Hey, we need troops to sign up and volunteer." And in this huge crowd of like 50 or 60 people that they have, no one raises their hand. Like, no one, this is supposed to be a very honorable society of great
Proud,
warriors and
yeah,
valiant
proud
men.
warriors with honorable history.
Yeah, and no one's volunteering to go escort the queen to Middle Earth. It's so bizarre. And then it's the Isildur's friends and Isildur that were kicked off the ship, they raise their hands and they say, "Oh, I'm gonna go." And so now we have this new arc with all these new characters that we have to explore with the remaining 6 hours of show we have left. And I guess it's supposed to be a redemption arc for them getting kicked off the boat, and maybe they'll be able to prove themselves to the captain man that kicked them
It
out.
would have been. It seemed like it would have made more sense for them to have Isildur volunteer first and then his friends volunteer after, because that would be his redemption for ruining their lives essentially. But then it has no consequence because they just get to be, right? Because what else would they be doing? Like they're going to be sailing, presumably over there.
Maybe they'll take a dragon.
No, I mean I just sorry that threw me so far off. That is not how this world.
That's not how Tolkien's world works. I don't know how this one works. People are fucking crazy in this world. You got meteor men, you got people swimming to and from continents.
But anyways, it's my train of thought's gone. That threw me so far off. I don't remember what I was going to say.
But yeah, it should have been Isildur
Yep.
that volunteered to go, not his friends. It should have been his redemption arc. Like, hey, sorry, I kind of messed up your whole entire lives.
And then they volunteer after.
Yeah, and they're like, "Oh, well, that's our friend. We gotta stick with him." But no, his friends volunteer first, and then he sees that, and then he said,
Yep.
"Oh, I'll
Timid
go."
little coward.
It just,
Isildur.
yeah, they just turned him into this little like pansy of a man.
He's just a little bitch.
When, yeah, it's so weird. And another thing I noticed specifically with this episode, but I'm sure you could say this overall for the show, is that every scene is overly dramatized. Like every scene ends with like the slow zoom of the camera and like the crescendo of music in the background. And then it takes you to the next scene when the same thing happens. They have this talk and everything's super serious. And then the camera starts zooming in on the characters' faces. And then the music crescendos. And then we cut to the next scene. And then seriously, if you watch this episode, the 4th episode in this show, it happens at the end of almost every single scene. Very dramatized. And it makes it boring after a while because, like, yeah, those shots are cool when you're trying to convey that these characters are in a dangerous position or this is a very serious matter that they're discussing. But when you do it at the end of almost every single scene in one episode, it just starts to get boring because you're like, okay, everything's dramatic and, you know, the world's on fire and we gotta save it. It just gets very hard to watch.
Well, it works if you have a build up, right? You build up to stuff like that. The dramatic endings of things you build up to. Like it's the crescendo of the music happens right at the moment where it's like this triumphant decision making. Like, and I think that's what the showrunners thought it was going to be. I think that whoever was advising them was like, "Oh, this is going to be great. People are going to love this." And then it just turned into, "What the hell am I watching?" I just feel like the way these characters behave and act has thrown off everything in the show, like how these moments would normally be if it was good writing. If these were characters that were like actually done well, you would feel that crescendo. Like the character and the world building are the most important elements, and they've been bastardized at this point. I mean, we really are in a situation where I don't know if it matters what choices they make right now. The things they would have to do to redeem Galadriel are almost beyond what they're capable of doing in the time they have left.
Unless they made her Sauron.
Yeah, that would.
Then it would be fine.
That's what I mean. Like that would be the thing they would have to do. They would have to show that she's just this deceitful, evil character who's a sociopath who doesn't care about anything. This petulant child brat who's spoiled, rotten, and thinks she can get her way by whining her way into anything, and actually does get her way. Like it doesn't matter what happens, what the world around her is doing, what other people have in need, as far as their needs and concerns. Galadriel's number one, baby, and that's all that matters. You either get on the same page or get out of the way. And if you try to get out of the way, I'm gonna drag you into it anyways.
She might as well just be Rick from Rick and Morty.
Well, she's just a force of nature at this point. I mean, the writers have turned her into that.
She's a tempest.
No, there's a
Remember,
tempest
there's a
in
tempest
her.
inside of her. So painful to sit. It's like the people that wrote this show. No offense to them. I'm sure you guys are lovely people, but man,
I'm not
this
so
is
sure
not
of that.
good.
I'll be honest with you. The writing of this one character makes me wonder. It makes me wonder, like, what kind of people would write this as a hero? People that I wouldn't want to hang around with. I'll be honest. I can't imagine a world in which we would get along. Where, hell, you would get along with anyone, including yourselves. I can't imagine a world. You think the world works like that? You are out of your mind. People do not respond well to people who behave like Galadriel does in this show. I am sorry.
Well, it doesn't matter if they respond well or not. They get what they want, so clearly it works.
It's so frustrating.
What would you give this episode out
1.
of 10? Yeah, I would probably give it a 2, just because again I really do like the shots of Numenor. I think it's very pretty.
Fine, I'll give it
That's it.
I'll give it a 2 just because there were a few moments where they were like they showed and they didn't tell, like with Adar.
Yeah, and there was a scene that I did like between Elrond and Durin when his wife asked, she's like, "So how did you guys meet?" And they're like, and Elrond's like, or Durin is like, "Oh, well, I saved him from these 3
2.
trolls or these 2 trolls." And Elrond was like, "Actually, it was 3 and I saved you. You were crying like a baby." And he's like, "No, it was you." And they just kind of go back and forth. I thought that was cute.
It was a
I like
moment
that.
of like establishing their friendship. It makes it like it's a show, don't tell. Like, there we go again. I'll give it a 2 just for that reason. Like, there were a few moments where it was like, you see the potential of some of these things where it's like, okay, if there was more of this in the show, maybe I could get behind it a little bit more, but here we are.
You know what would have been a better show is post Lord of the Rings, just Legolas and Gimli, because after they said, if they survived the war together, they would go back to Fangorn Forest because Legolas really wanted to meet the Ents and spend time in the woods. And Gimli really wanted to go back to Helm's Deep to go into the cave system that ran behind and under it because that's what he was fascinated by. And they said, "All right, if we both survive this war, I'll go with you to the forest if you come with me to the caves." Just like a little show about them, just like going about their day in Middle Earth. That would have been so fun to watch. It's so much more entertaining than Galadriel being a child for 4 hours straight.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I'm really tired of that character, and from what I've seen online, it just gets worse from here. I can't imagine how much worse it could possibly get, but
they could have more scenes with her.
Yeah, I just wish she would face some consequences for being a horrible person for once, like just for once.
Well, that is all from us today. So thank you very much for listening. If you did, if you watched this episode, let us know what you think of it. I know episode 5, which is the next one we're watching, I've heard that's going to be the worst one. I'm very excited to watch that. Not because it's going to be good, because I like watching things burn. So if you have any thoughts specifically on this show or this episode or anything else, I don't care. Let us know.
If you have any corrections, obviously we're capable of being wrong about stuff.
I'm not, but that's okay.
That's right. You are a female. You're not. You're literally not capable of being wrong in this.
Yeah, not in this show. I'm not. I'm infallible and perfect in every way.
And it doesn't matter if you make a mistake. The world's going to learn around you to bend to your will.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I do wish there were female characters that were actually well written. I would love that.
You remember Eowyn?
Yeah, I would love that. Yeah, I would love that.
Eowyn was cool. I like Eowyn.
She was a human who had there were consequences to her actions, and she felt emotion, proper emotions that made sense.
Yeah, not sociopathic emotions.
No, sociopathic non-emotions. Manipulative, crazy person. But anyways, that's my final thought, my last disappointing thought. But yeah, if anybody has any corrections to anything we said, please leave it in the comments and I'll review it and check it. And I will research it, so you better be on it. Have the tools.
Do we have a way to end this? We'll see you in the next episode.